Hi friends! Welcome to another video. I wore earrings today just for you because I thought I could be more interesting in my headshots, so yes. But anyway, welcome to part 5 of Emma. Today we are finally going to be making that Yellow Pelisse. I've been waiting for it, you've been waiting for it. Actually, I don't know what you've been waiting for. Now, if you don't know what a pelisse is, it is basically a type of coat or jacket worn in the Regency era. The one seen on the movie poster to the movie Emma is the one I'm going to be replicating. Here's an analysis from top to bottom so that you'll be able to understand the terms of the pelisse as I make it. First, the fabric. The fabric is probably made out of like a wool material that she wears. You can kind of see the texture in some of the reference pictures. I was not able to find wool and I ended up using some sort of cotton muslin canvas blend. The skirt is flat in the front and gathered in the back, and it has a thick hem about 4 to 6 inches. The front of the bodice has 3 darts at the bust, and there are 7 rows of button shanks down the front. The back has 14 pleats and a 5 to 6 inch button tab at the bottom. This tab has piping around it. Her collar is 4 pieces with a curved seam, and it is higher in the back. Peeking out of this collar is a chemisette with a scalloped edge. The sleeves are 2 layers. The shorter sleeve has 2 front-facing pleats on the shoulder and 4 back-facing pleats at the back. The edge of the sleeve is piped and features a pleated ruffle made from a lighter fabric. The longer sleeve ends a little bit past the wrist and are cinched at the wrist with button tabs. The whole pelisse ties in the front with a large bow, and that completes the analysis. Now onto making this costume. First we need to make the chemisette. And I'm going to do this by draping some of my leftover cotton gauze on my dress form, including all the undergarments I've already made. Do this so that you can accommodate for the extra material that will be worn underneath. Mark your neckline in the front and back. Cut away the fabric around the bust line and shoulder seam. Cut your neck hole and then split the front down the middle. Around the opening you just cut out, stitch a rolled hem and also hem the fabric around the shoulders. Next, cut a thin drawstring. This drawstring should be large enough to tie around your bust line. Encase this around the bottom of your chemisette with a zipper foot. It should look something like this. To make the pleated ruffle, I cut a strip of cotton voile on a 3 to 4 inch slope so that the back would be long enough to stick above the raised collar in the back of the pelisse. Then I traced my scalloped pattern onto the fabric. Then I stay-stitched some interfacing just above the hem to stabilize the embroidery. Then I embroidered it. Pleat and stitch the ruffle and then attach it to the chemisette. The chemisette is done, so I moved on to my pelisse. Here is the mock-up. You can see one side I had the raw edges facing out so that I could alter it as needed, and on the other side it was turned right side out so that you can see the final pattern.
I don't know how to film my back. This is not easy.
Now here I was supposed to insert a clip of me explaining why I went to the fabric store at 5 a.m. to get more fabric, but that clip got corrupted, so here we are. I'm just gonna explain why I did that. Funny story, guys. I bought some cotton canvas to use for this pelisse, and it was a very lightweight cotton canvas. Like, it was a cotton duck canvas, maybe like 7 to 10 ounces, and I thought that would be light enough for this pelisse, and when I got it, it still felt light enough. And then I went to go cut out my pattern and it didn't work out. I cut out just the back pleats and then I was trying to experiment with it and it was just way too stiff, and I was like, there's no way that if I wear this as a pelisse it's gonna weigh like 20 pounds. Anyway, the reason I bought the canvas was because it was the only fabric available to me at the time that would have worked for this pelisse. But then when I scrapped it, I remembered that there was this fabric at Walmart that I saw that was the perfect texture and weight for this pelisse, and I wanted to get it as soon as possible, and so I could either go at like really late at night or really, really early in the morning when they opened. And I've been to Walmart late at night and I did not like the energy there, so I decided to wake up at 5 a.m. because I had places to be around 8 or 9, and so I drove myself to Walmart and I picked up the fabric and all was well. So yeah, that's basically what happened. Next, I began dyeing fabric samples, and once I thought I was happy with my color, I serged my fabric so that I could dye it. Guys, I think I need to make another emergency shopping trip for this video because I just finished dyeing my fabric and it came out pretty good, but it was just a smidgen lighter
in a shade that I needed, and it just needs to be a couple shades darker. The solution is I have to get more golden yellow, which is this one right here, and I only have like maybe 2 tablespoons left, which is not enough to dye 6 yards of fabric. So I need to go buy more.
On to the cutting. Now, the skirt was originally going to be cut as one piece, but because my fabric was now 45 inches in width instead of 60 inches, it was not so. This led to some unnecessary fabric math witchcraft in which I ended up with 2 front panels and 2 back panels. The top of the front panel measures 13 inches and the bottom measures 32 inches. The top of the back panel measures 28 inches and the bottom measures 40 inches. The bodice and sleeves were cut from my mock-up, obviously, and various strips were cut out for the piping. I started by piping some macrame cord for the shoulder seam at the back, and then I piped some drawstring for the thin piping on the short sleeve and the button tab. I first joined the side and back seams together, and then I sewed those 3 darts at the bust.
Alright, so let's have a little chat about these back pleats, because this is the trickiest part of the entire, probably the entire project, because it took me a little over an hour to kind of get this all situated, because these pleats are a monstrosity. They're so hard to get right. So I'm just going to share with you a few of my tips that I used. The first is pin the top part first. I know that it doesn't look like the top bits are sewn in place when you see her original dress, but pinning these in place really helps get the placement correct, and you have to make sure that you pin them like very, very precisely. I pinned this side like perfect the first time, and it only took me about 10-15 minutes to pleat this side, and this one took me like half an hour or more to kind of, I had to keep fixing it, and I realized the reason why I couldn't get them to sit straight was because these pleats were not in really nice places. So yeah, just play around with it and try pinning these bits first. I find it helps to work from the sides inward from each side and meet in the middle, because these are the trickiest ones, because you're trying to, as you can see, these pleats kind of just lay straight, but these ones are on a harsh diagonal line. So you really want to make sure that you start over here where you have the most fabric, because this one is the hardest pleat to get straight, and when you like pull it taut, it should lay nice and beautiful. So I'm probably going to give this a light press with the iron, or maybe a steam, just to make sure that they're set in place, and then we shall go from there.
After those were pressed, I stay stitched them in place. I also tacked the pleats at the top by hand sewing. For the collar, I cut my pieces from my fabric, and I also cut them from a layer of canvas to stiffen the collar. I sewed together one layer and then added another of the yellow fabric to cover the other side of the canvas. The collar was then pressed in place, and then I stitched the collar to the bodice and hand sewed down the lining. Onto the sleeves. I first did the piping on the short sleeve by machine stitching it and then turning it under and doing a blind hem. The sleeve was then sewn up, and the pleats at the top and back were then stay stitched. I stitched up the long sleeve and stay stitched it onto the short one. For the button tab at the back, I first sewed thin piping around the edges and turned the raw edges to the back, and then hand sewed a lining on top to cover the raw edges. So basically I had 2 button tab pieces, and then I sandwiched the piping in between them by first machine stitching it to one of those pieces and then turning it inward and then hand sewing, like top stitching down the other layer, if that makes sense. I also sewed together the button tabs for the sleeves. Then I sewed the long 2-inch strip of fabric for that tie in the front, and the skirt panels were also stitched together. The reason I'm skipping around here with the sewing is because my fabric, when I dyed it, it came out a little bit lighter than I liked it to, and the reason why I was doing all this sewing was because I needed to put it back in the dye bath and I wanted to just get as much machine sewing done as possible so that I wouldn't have too many raw edges exposed to when I had to throw this in the washing machine. So I just wanted to make sure that most of the edges were all stitched up and ready to go. I didn't have to lose a lot of my fabric, and you know, it'd just be easier that way. So basically I ended up throwing in the skirt, the bodice, the sleeves, and then my tie and my button tabs. Those were all separate, and then they were placed in the dye bath and then machine washed. For the dyeing process, I used 3 gallons of water in a giant canning pot, and I inserted my fabric, and originally I had this done in 2 chunks. I had a 4-yard chunk and a 2-yard chunk, and the 2 yards was originally meant for the bodice and the 4 yards was for the skirt. And then I tried to use a dye formula from the Rit Dye website, but it ended up like the color that it said it would, but at the same time, it ended up being a little bit too light because the color online just looked like it would be the right color, but then it turns out it wasn't. So then I just decided to do my own thing, and I ended up buying 3 bottles of Rit Dye Golden Yellow, and then just dyeing my fabric 3 times. I just kept dyeing it until it came out to the right color, and it all worked out in the end, so that's good. After dyeing again, I sewed the sleeves to the bodice, and then pleated the back of my skirt. According to the reference, there are also 7 pleats per side, 4 inner pleats closer together and 3 wider pleats about 2 inches wide, which go from the button tab to the side seam. Next, I joined the skirt and bodice and stitched down that tie around that seam. Now onto the hand sewing, which I always have trouble getting footage of, so bear with me. First, I hemmed the opening from top to bottom, and then did the button shanks. I used white shanks covered with cotton gauze, which were also thrown into the yellow dye bath.
Alright, so now I'm doing the button shanks on the pelisse, and what I've done is I have dyed some of my macrame cord to match the color of the pelisse, and I have tied them into little loops. Then I marked with pins where I want to put to my shanks, and then what I do is I take an awl. And it's important that you use an awl because you just want to separate the fibers of the fabric. You do not want to cut them because that can make the fabric tear. And you're just going to poke a hole through and keep that poked through for a second. Then I take a seam ripper, gently place the macrame cord through the seam ripper, and then you're just going to poke your seam ripper through that hole. And I have knotted my macrame cord at the end about 3 times, so it should stay, and you're just going to pull that loop through the hole. And then it should kind of give your loops a good foundation to stick in there. But I'm also going to go through with some needle and thread and just stitch it down just to make sure it's extra secure. And then I'm going to add my buttons.
The shanks were then attached, and I also added a hook and bar at the top of the collar for extra support. I hand sewed my tie down. Then I made buttonholes in my back tab and proceeded to attach my fabric covered buttons. For the tabs on the sleeves, I unpicked 1 inch of my seam and squished my tab in there and re-sewed it in place. Then I hemmed my sleeves and the bottom of the pelisse. My hem at the bottom of the pelisse was about 6 inches wide. Next, I stitched in my pleated ruffle to the sleeve with a blind hem stitch. This ruffle is also made from cotton gauze. And I also didn't have a clip of this, but I did buttonholes in the button tabs on my sleeves and then added more fabric covered buttons to close it up. And finally the pelisse was complete. Thanks for watching, you guys. I originally meant for this video to come out about 2 weeks ago, but then I got cripplingly ill. It is cold season, so stay warm. Anyway, I got really sick and I couldn't really do much, so I spent the first week trying to get as much done as I could, and then the second week trying to catch up on all the work that I missed. So finally, it is here, and I'm finished with the police, so thank you so much for your patience. The next video in this series will feature the accessories, which I'm so excited for. I've already gotten started on them. And then after that we will have the grand reveal. I'm sorry if there's too many jump cuts, I'm trying to read my notes. There will be links down below where you can follow me on Pinterest. On Pinterest I have all of my reference photos that I use for all of my projects, and then a couple mood boards for some projects that I'm thinking about doing or projects that I'm secretly doing. You can also follow me on Instagram, where I'll be posting fun behind the scenes photos and also featuring projects that I will not be putting on this YouTube channel. There are some projects that I cannot film because I'm in a different sewing studio, so I will be featuring some behind the scenes photos of those projects on my Instagram. And when those projects are completed, there will be grand reveals on this channel, so you'll still get to see those projects. And with all that said, I'll see you guys next time. Adieu. Good night. Goodbye. Oh dear. There we go. Hi friends, whoa. What was up with my voice?
I ran out of bobbin thread again. This better turn out good, because, pardon my language, but it is too hecking difficult to get all these pleats to be perfect. So, you know, wish me luck.
But because my fabric was now 45 inches in length instead of 60 inches in width... Wait, I have no idea what I just read. I just read that blankly. But it sounded okay, so let's just keep going. In with, like... I don't know. My earring just fell out. Hold on. Alright, so now, whoop. There goes my camera. Now for the reveal. I found the chicken. Yeah, I got a really bad cold. There goes my earring again.